morning. Welcome to the Old School, a
Thank you,
podcast
Herr
about
Miller.
well, no,
I jumped in early.
you
I
jumped
was
in way
excited.
early.
Oh, okay. Well, keep going. I'll defer.
I know you interrupted my flow. Now I don't know what to do.
You said your name was Ross Miller.
Well, yes, it happens to be. Yeah.
What are you reading it or
And
something?
you are Dr. Stephen Bourgeois. I have
Yes.
to find the line on the paper. This is this is the Old School, a podcast normally a little bit more lively on my end.
Yes.
About the American education system, its quirks, its qualities, its traits, its various infirmed employees. And with that, we shall say good morning here, Dr. Bourgeois.
Hello, Herr Miller. How the heck are you on this fine morning?
I'm not the heck fine, I can tell you that.
You mentioned you weren't feeling well a few minutes ago, and that's why I was so excited to jump into the podcast, because this is always fun.
I think if it comes to the fact that you are the energy of this show, we are indeed in some trouble.
You're saying I'm some depressive character, sardonic?
No. You have a low energy charisma about you. So
I've been told that.
He's really soft spoken, but my God, he brings it home though, doesn't he? So
yeah, I've been told I'm a sandbagger.
You're the guy that walks into a pool hall and say, "No, I've never played before." So
I actually did that about a month ago, not at a pool hall, but a casual affair. What the hell is this thing you hold?
So how do you hold this? Do I put the white ball in the pocket? Yes, that's what you do. So I would like to get you into a pool hall. I think it'd be interesting to see. Well, I've spent many time.
Yeah, you have. You spent like every one day a week for about all of your career before you met me.
Right.
You've tried to get me in pool halls, on the golf course. We went on the tennis court briefly, but not the pool. And I think the pool is probably, of all of those, your best sport.
Well, it used to be. I don't know if it is anymore, but
that's as a hustler would say. I know your game here, Miller.
All right, very good. Now you're saying that I'm sandbagging.
Yeah, you would if there's money involved, I'm sure.
I told you, I of all the years I've played pool, I don't think I've ever. Well, no, I take that back. I played for money once, and it convinced me to never do it again. So,
well, the money threw you off your game.
Well, you start thinking about it. You can't help it, And I choked. There's no two ways around it. I choked.
You need to just play. And I'm quoting The Color of Money about every line here, and you don't remember it. You're getting old here, Miller.
I like that movie, although I like the precursor better. So,
okay.
Paul Newman, Jackie Gleason.
Yeah.
The Hustler? The Color of Money was like the glitzy 80s sexy version of The Hustler. The original Hustler is a little bit more gritty, a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more darker. Those people in that Color of Money, they're too beautiful. It can't be gritty. It can't be edgy. So,
well, it has some wisdom though, with the older man and the young buck. I think that's what it's about. But if you don't like to look at beautiful people in films,
I'll stick with the John Wayne film. So, but I think all the times I've played pool, I mean, there are certainly valuable lessons to be gained from it. I think we've talked about this before, I'm sure, on multiple occasions, but I think sometimes people get the idea that learning happens best inside the four walls of a classroom. And I think in actuality, the classroom can be rather uninteresting compared to what you find out interacting with people, traveling, that sort of thing. And so I think there's a certain wisdom that comes with billiards. And I don't know. I think of it with fond memories.
Okay, well,
there you go.
Have to do it sometime. I'm not opposed. I know you have some seedy locations and some run with a rough crowd, but you're there to protect me. It's good to have a Marine with you. And to feel better.
No, I can't fight, but he can. Was that great scene from the old school with Rodney Dangerfield? He goes, "You're a fighter?" So, "Oh no, I'm a lover. I'm not a fighter." He's a fighter. And then like, the actor that played Adrian's brother in the Rocky films shows up and starts crushing, napkin holders, what have you. And then the young bucks like, "Hey, huh?"
You're getting off track about napkin holders. You're
Yeah,
talking about the great Burt Young, right?
Burt Young, that's it. There you go.
Okay. I almost said Burt Ward.
That is not the same guy. So anyway, a lot of wisdom to be gained from both movies and pool. So
yeah, and from Burt Ward. At one point, he started speaking Spanish. Did you know that?
In the Batman series?
Yeah, Batman said something, and Robin said, "CC Batman." Just out of the blue, it was hilarious.
Is that your only Spanish you got?
I have a lot more. I'm just not ready to share it right now.
Dos cervezas, por favor.
Oh yeah, dos, tres, cuatro.
I got to know all the numbers up to 10.
That's right. That's it. That's where I'm out.
He can't drink more than 10. He doesn't know how to say it. Jesus. All right. Enough of this silliness.
Really? Yeah, knock it off.
Yes. So I think the topic today is something that, as luck would have it, you're very good about talking about. And given my rather infirm condition, I can just jump in with witticisms from time to time, but
play my role. Snarky comments at an opportune moment.
I'll be the straight man this time. So, but
okay.
but we have discussed before about the beating that the humanities have taken at the hands, the club-fisted hands of STEM education. And I think in line with humanities is also the arts, particularly music and art. And I want to know, for you, it may have been an easy transition to go from, because you are a musician, you're a trained musician, highly qualified trained musician. And so it was probably not very surprising that you found yourself inside of a classroom trying to teach kids how to play instruments. But what was music education like when you began your career, and what did it look like in contrast at the end of your career?
Wow. So you give me something high and outside. Just kind of sitting up there. Back in my day when I went to high school, particularly, we had a lot of freedom. And so that's kind of the context, meaning we didn't have all these core classes. I mean, we had a few, but, about 60% of my day was music. I had a period where I was practicing, a period with a quartet, with a piano, violin, viola, and cello. I was in string orchestra. I played violin and viola, and I accompanied the choir, eventually the jazz choir. And so that's a lot of music in a day. And so that so schools were really open to that. If you had an interest, you could pursue it, and almost as a professional school in a typical high school. So things definitely shifted with the transition to testing. But what was your question again?
Well, just talking about, as STEM education has grown in prominence and in emphasis, the fact that school districts seem to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to shape and mold and advance their STEM education, trying to make that case that they are indeed set to usher kids into the next century, into the future jobs that lie ahead of them through STEM education. And I can't imagine that music and art has not, as history has not changed over the course of that time, and perhaps not for the better.
Well, in lot of school districts, there's a tendency now towards, professional type courses, at least having a coherent schedule where you have, I mean, they do it in Texas where you have it's not called a major, but it's a specialty that you probably know the technical term for that, a pathway.
Yes.
And so if you're in a high school today as a student, you do have a vibrant choice of electives in music, and they have some really incredible programs. If you want to be a band student, they take them pretty far. I mean, it's quite impressive how far you go if you practice. They have private teachers that they make it affordable, so almost everybody has a private teacher. That applies to all of the performing arts, and so I think that it's there if you want it, and that's if you attend a traditional large high school where they have the funding for that type of thing. So I would say that in some ways, the arts are very healthy. Where they fall apart is the lower grades, where there's a time where it's kind of given lip service, but really not intensive training like you potentially could get in high school.
I could be wrong, and it's been known to happen, but it seems that two things have happened with regards to music education. One is that you're not really allowed, as a student, you're not really allowed to dabble anymore. You're not allowed to explore. You either have to go all in all the time. And this is where you have the pathways that you were talking about earlier. But you either have that or you're just locked in on these pathways where you just don't have the luxury of taking anything in excess to what your primary objective is. And, no one is allowed to just, and I come across this a lot, whether it's about, students who have a musical interest, but they also have other interests as well. You can't really, a student can't really create for themselves, at least not very easily, a kind of a diversified mentality, a diversified range of interests, because there's so much emphasis on specialization. And I think that that's where, at least at the high school level, as far as I see, and again, I'm outside of the department. And so perhaps my perceptions are incorrect, but it seems that it's a kind of an all or nothing sort of thing. You're either in or you're not in. And so the notion of dabbling, the notion of experimentation, the high school structure, at least here in our area, doesn't lend itself to it. And I know that there are plenty of examples around the country that create their high schools in much the same way.
I would agree. It would be difficult for a student to study band and be all in, and also say study drama. And a lot of schools have great programs in both areas, or choir. It's set up because of the rehearsal structure, and there's a lot of after school commitments, and particularly they all have this, if in theater, if there are productions which take a lot of time outside of class. In band programs, everybody in the fall, everybody is in the marching band in some capacity, and it's a huge time commitment, lots of travel. So it's really not practical to have two areas. A few students do it, but most will pick. And then the other thing that's looming behind all this is athletics.
Right.
That you can't be a competitive high level athlete and then also be a top performer in the arts. It's rare. I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen, but usually you have to make this choice, and it becomes apparent in about ninth grade when you try to do both. You realize the scheduling it's prohibitive. You can't really go to tennis matches and also do marching band. You have to choose, and that is unfortunate. I agree with you.
Well, then the next thing that you get these kids that come across with this self-possessed kind of persona. But in actuality, there's many things that they're interested in that they can't pursue. They're kind of blocked. And so there was a British conservative philosopher named Roger Scruton who had I don't know if it was a podcast or it was like a show or something like that. But he had a very fascinating young lady on his show, and she said something that has stuck with me for quite a while. Ever since she said it, I just remember just being blown away by the sentiment where she said, when you focus on identity, you limit identity. And for our kids, they're being funneled into this system that creates an identity, but one that cannot have any, diversion, no variety within it. You're a math person, and we know you're a math person because you're loaded to the gill with math classes. You're a band person, and that's because you spend a gazillion hours a week at practice. And so I wonder to what degree the lack of opening up music education to a much more general clientele, if this is not having some detrimental effects, perhaps heretofore not spoken of or not realized.
I like the argument. I'm not sure how it applies to high school students, because they are specializing, but they're also getting a social group, and being part of that. Students are so different from each other, but they have kind of this common experience, and imagine schools where that is lacking. There's very, very little connection between students, and they're just kind of talking heads in the classroom, and then they're shuffled around the hallway. Then they're a talking head in another class, but they have something in common, and they're working towards a common goal, which is very important.
But even that circle, that social circle, it's not to say that there are not students who break this pattern, but even the social circles of some of our most driven students, that circle is mostly with students who share most of their classes. And so if you are like some sort of math savant, or you're some sort of science guru and this is your pathway, then the people you're surrounded by the most are also science oriented. And so even the social circle can be limiting, because your coursework is limited, because your experiences are limited, and it creates an overall kind of stunting of the individual. Now, again, there are plenty of people who break out of this, but there are many who don't see a reason for it. And so it's this kind of tunnel mindset that says, this is my focus, this is what I'm going to do. My success in these classes are key to getting into the right school, what have you. It really kind of limits the individual. And, not to be over dramatic about this, but you can't help but think about the Pink Floyd's The Wall, the notion of, the film where kids are just being cranked through a sausage grinder and everything looks the same. And I just can't help thinking about that sometimes when I talk to my students.
Well, I'm seeing kind of the opposite of that, because when a kid is in high school, particularly, they need to have their people, they need their social group, because the other side of what you're saying is to be isolated, and that's I think a bigger problem of the two. You've taught forever. They've built several schools around you personally, and you would probably agree that your best students ever have been band students, and to some extent athletes, but people who have something else, who are highly scheduled and busy. It makes for a healthy high school experience, and you don't get distracted with nonsense. And so I think overall, it's a calculus, but I don't know what you're proposing, but it sounds like you'd like students to be able to, you use the word dabble, so take a music class, take a theater class, and so forth, which they can, but the truth is, those types of courses where you're getting just a general understanding, applied music or something like that, music appreciation, you tend to get people who are just doing it because it's an elective and they need the credit. So it's not this turnaround, beautiful moment where you're converting people to, oh, now I love classical music. You're managing. I tried that at a school where it needs to have some performance element to it,
Right.
to get them working for something. But otherwise, it just becomes a uncomfortable experience, particularly for the teacher, but also for the other students.
So in that case, and I'm very much aware that your three children, accomplished musicians, a lot of them, they have very diverse interests. And I think that that is as much to do with how they were raised as they are how they're influenced by social forces. I think, yes, I think you're correct. We talked about this before, again, that the musician, the athlete tends to be the best student. But as we have talked about also before, that the best student is not necessarily the best student. And the question comes in as to why they're learning. Why do they think they're learning? Well, what is their long range kind of goals with the knowledge that they're taking in? And if it doesn't fall within their particular discipline, they may have an interest, but the interest only goes so far as the class. I can be interesting at times, and I can be compelling at times, but ultimately it's up to the student to help find their own interest in something. And so, while yes, in general, I can say that musicians and athletes do make the best students. You also have to be careful what kind of student you're creating. And like I said, you've done an amazing job with yours. But I also find myself sometimes perplexed by conversations or the lack of conversations that I can have with some of these more driven students. And I just worry about the notion of being able to, just explore other interests while at the same time maybe following your best instincts on something. We talked about before the notion of what's the dangers of specialization and what is the potential pitfalls of that. And I think that that's primarily what I'm talking about. And I just worry that music education has become an all or nothing proposition. And I don't know how many classes we really have that simply allows for a kind of a casual, certainly low stakes kind of approach to either music in general or an instrument in particular.
There are some, I guess, lessons in music that aren't really about music. And I go back and forth on the competitive nature, particularly of music programs and everything about performance and getting judged and competing. And I mean, that goes with my motivational theories that I espouse, that what you see are students who are working for a common goal, but it's about the winning and the competition, probably more than about the music making itself. Not always.
Mm-hmm.
But to that point, a lot, I would say most people who are, students who are in a band program, once they walk across the stage, will never pick up that instrument again.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and is that a bad thing? Maybe. I mean, it's a shame because they put in, hundreds and hundreds of hours to develop the level of competence. But the competitive part is a little bit troubling because, I would like to, create musicians, people who are lifetime musicians, and I think the competitive part of it plays against that. At the same time, there's this implicit lesson that athletes learn, that musicians learn, that those who get good at something, that the process, there's a lot of behind the scenes that nobody sees, on that stage when you perform. The parents come and sit in the auditorium, other students watch, and they just hear a performance. But there's so much practice and rehearsal and private lessons and struggle behind that. And I think that's really the benefit, the primary benefit of doing anything that's performance based, is that you learn this lesson of practice and hard work. And and pretty much you can do anything if you apply that methodology later on.
I think both with music and with athletics,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's perhaps one of the most significant lessons that is learned.
Well, there's another. I mean, just follow on that, and I mean, you can imagine athletics. It's a meritocracy like music is.
Right.
In athletics, I mean, it doesn't matter anything but can you perform. So the team that's the starting five in the basketball team, they're the ones who are going to give you the best chance of winning, and so there's no doubt about it. The coach is going to put in the people that will help them win. But in music, it is the same thing, because a lot of high schools have 2, 3, 4 bands, and it's competitive, but it's not based on who you know. And often they even do blind auditions where the judges don't see them and they just give a rating. So there's something about that is really appealing because it is a meritocracy, and often in a classroom, we've talked this to death, but it's not about how much you learn, but it's about how you know how to be a student and fill in the blanks and so forth. But in music, it is based upon what you can produce, through your horn, for example.
So if music education is healthier, at least in the high schools, than I feared it was or wasn't, in what ways do you think it could be better? I mean, how do you improve it? And you talked about the kind of the dangerous elements of competition towards something that, I mean, I guess it's always been competition to a certain degree, but I mean, how would you alter or change music education? What's happening at the lower grades that you've seen that explains why music education is not being as successful there as it was in the past?
I think all elective programs are being cannibalized, in the elementary level particularly, because they have so much time that they're willing. Some districts call them specials, meaning it's not even a class, it's something else, and you have a music teacher who's jumping around from grade level to grade level and doing probably some really good work, but it's not a cohesive program because there's very little contact time with each student. And some of these music teachers are asked to go from school to school within a district and do their song and dance, as it were. And that, but they're not building musicians because of why? Why is that? Because of the state testing, and schools decide, well, we need to put more time into math and we're going to revamp the schedule. So that schedule is what prevents music from being taught in the elementary level. They just a lot, it's getting smaller and smaller. The walls are kind of closing in on the time that they're willing to devote to not just music, but art and anything else that's not on that state test.
Well, and then I wanted to give some time then to ask you something that we talked about before and you enjoyed doing, besides your father, whose influence on you looms large and one of the reasons why you're such a great musician. I wonder if there are any other music teachers that you met either as a student or as a teacher that you feel was doing things in the way that it could best be done. It was a kind of a model for you, as it were.
You get a lot of different teachers going through grade levels, in music, just like in any course, but they all seem to, for me at least, have different approaches. Some were very open, and they would be effusive in their praise, which for some, and for me at that age, it really helped. So I wanted to work for them, and I wanted to put in time and practice and surprise them with what I could do. Was given a lot of chances to perform, and so the effort was definitely rewarded. Some of them were were challenging. I mean, I was a accompanist, and being a choir accompanist, a pianist for a choir, is really difficult because you need to follow that director. You need to anticipate what they're doing in the rehearsal. And a lot of people don't know this, but as they're rehearsing, they talk, they give a little feedback, and then they say, "Now let's run measure eight right now." Boom. And if the pianist is kind of fumbling around in their music, they're inefficient and they've lost the moment. And so I remember being called out for that early on in my accompanying. Say, this you weren't ready. You didn't know your music, and and you need to be on top of it. You need to anticipate what I'm doing, be in my head, basically. So you're right there. And that was hard, and that's when my father was the orchestra teacher there. So, I knew him, he knew me, but he was straight with me and said, you need to be really prepared. And so you learn how to take tough feedback, when necessary, but it also makes you better. So I think I had a spectrum of teachers, and then of course at the university level, it's the same idea. You have people who do different things for you, but ultimately you kind of have one teacher of this combined individual.
It's interesting. You think about some of the most famous band leaders. Some of them are known for having quite kind of mercurial personalities. The one that kind of immediately jumps to mind is Buddy Rich, and someone who would spend all this time yelling and screaming at his orchestra, basically saying, what the hell's wrong with you? This is not how you're supposed to do it. Get your act together or get out. And so you'd have these kind of, and there's tapes you can hear online. You can hear some of his yelling sessions. He was quite known for it. It kind of reminds me of the reputation that sometimes you hear about with chefs. The chefs tend to be rather brutal with their underlings. But the image I get from hearing you talk about, the litany of folks that you have interacted with over your career is that it really is a hodgepodge. You have people with different styles, different strengths, and they bring that to how they conduct the orchestra or how they conduct the band.
It's very different. And I never, as a performer, I never liked it when the band leader was a drummer. They do tend to be a little rough, and it's all about tempo, and meaning you can't, play with the tempo and slow down a little bit. So it's to me, it was less musical, particularly, accompanying a singer with a drummer kind of wanting to press forward, and the singer, like me, she wanted to, and so, there's a tension with any leader, but ultimately they're just trying to get the best out of everybody in their own way, and the truth is, particularly working with adults or students, you're not always the nicest person when you're trying to do that, because it's a tough job to get everybody to do it. And so often fear is a good motivator for people in an orchestra. And the thing that makes that necessary is time. You only have so much time for rehearsal, so they don't suffer fools. And typically they're pretty short with people.
You're talking about the tension that exists between the drummer and the quote unquote singer. I was thinking about that movie, with Tom Hanks, and about the Wonders, the
Wonders. Oh yeah, That Thing You Do.
That Thing You Do. So there, at the beginning of that film, they had written a song, and the lead singer had meant it to be a ballad and a kind of a soulful, emotional type of thing. And then I guess the drummer had other ideas, and he begins to ramp up the tempo. And the singer tried his best in the middle of a performance to keep his tempo, and then ultimately he was just overshadowed by the drums and the screaming kids and what have you. But
was that hit? Was that their one hit wonder? The fast tempo?
Yeah.
Well, you're just saying that because you're a former drummer.
I'm just saying, sometimes drummers have a better sense of the right tempo to strike, so.
Well, I think they're over officious. They need to be put in the background where they belong.
One last one. Well, yeah. Maybe we belong back there. But we are the heartbeat of what's happening on that stage, my friend. Don't ever forget it. No matter how cool you think you are behind the tickling the ivories, you're living out your Billy Joel or Elton John dreams, or Oscar Peterson, or Keith Jarrett. It's the drummer it's the drummer. He's the sexy one. He's the one that has the most intrigue. He's half hidden, so there's a bit of mystery about him. And the guy in front with the piano, or the lead singer, everyone can see him. I mean, he's not as interesting because we already know him. But it's the guy behind the scene.
You're really bringing up this point, and it's about the drummer. He's the sexy one. Okay. How do you follow that?
You can't. You just say, yes, you're correct.
Okay. Yes, you're correct.
How important do you? It's kind of a last question here, but to kind of wrap up what music education can be or can look like. How important is it for students to know more than one instrument or more than one type of instrument? I'm not talking about someone being able to play 2 or 3 different types of woodwinds, but to be able to actually cross the divide into other realms of the orchestra or band. How important is that, do you think, intellectually, as far as learning goes?
Miller, have you ever played a double reed instrument like an oboe or a bassoon?
I played a bassoon once.
Okay. How did it sound?
It sounded awful because I didn't know what I was doing. So,
so that's what I was expecting. Not that maybe you weren't a brilliant player, but it's really difficult to get a sound out of any instrument that is not a grating noise. Because the mouthpieces are different. It's a different instrument, and playing a clarinet is a different embouchure, different everything, playing a brass instrument. And even just picking up a trumpet, it takes a long time to get something that sounds just okay. And the same is true for stringed instruments. Playing a violin, you sound like a cat screaming for about 2 years. And it's not just that your bow's bouncing up and down, you can't control it. And these instruments are all difficult. Playing the piano, you can make some progress early on, but then you hit a wall when you have to use 2 hands at the same time, and most people can't do that. So I think that's why that doesn't happen too much. Some can, and it's really, but they have to start over in a sense. So I think that's why you don't see too much switching around. I can tell you that when I was a substitute teacher back in Oregon, I would take jobs, and often they were music jobs. So I would be a band teacher for a day at a high school, and the students would switch instruments. So I just couldn't. The director gives me notes, do these songs. So I was a musician, so they knew that I could actually run a rehearsal.
Right.
But suddenly it sounds awful, and what's happening? The kids are kind of snickering. So, okay, we need to stop this and trade instruments back, and everybody stands up and goes around. That's my my memory of substitute teaching in band. It was not fun.
So you're saying that this ability is more found in the likes of practical jokes and chicanery than it is in actual talent. Someone like Prince, who supposedly could have played 27 different instruments.
If you do that, you have to put in the time.
Right.
They're all difficult in their own way, for sure.
Well, I don't know if we solved anything. I think, I think we may have solved something in that maybe my perceptions were not totally accurate as far as how I was seeing music education. So I guess in one way, I think it's nice to know that it may not be in as dire straits as I feared it was. But at the other end,
I want that quote. We should make that our introduction. My perception's changed, Steve. Thank you. I love it.
But I think we can also say that there's still some lingering issues at the lower levels, elementary and middle school levels. Part of it could be funding. Part of it could be structuring as far as how they structure the curriculum. Just shuffle a kid off to music once a week kind of a thing.
Well,
Maybe
let me say
there's
one more thing on that, just to not be unfair to middle school programs. Those are they are excellent, and they know how to introduce an instrument to students, and so really starting in fifth grade, they have quite a system. It's really impressive.
so that's where the musical education starts to write itself a little bit.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then they take them really, really far. If the student has a private teacher, and most do in these better programs. But yeah, so the elementary, leaves something to be desired, at least from my perspective. And it has nothing to do with the quality of the teachers. It has to do with the limited time they have.
Right. So, well, a new element, I think, for the most part, on the old school podcast, looking at musical education. I am not a musician, but I love the art of music, and I can certainly appreciate it. So, like I said, I'm kind of glad to know that perhaps our worst fears have not been realized, as it were, to quote the great Jim McKay. But so anyway, well, baseball's coming up.
Haven't they been playing for a month and a half already?
Yeah, but that was something different. So
what do you mean? They're playing. They show highlights like the top 10, and they're showing people diving or running into walls, catching balls. So I thought it already started.
Well, it has in a way, but now the real season is about to begin. And once again, you'll find that people, they step a little lighter, a smile comes a little easier. It's one of those things that it's the psychology of baseball that can improve a society as much as music can from time to time. So
I would argue that baseball season starts as soon as the NBA playoffs are over, and they're over later and later, almost in July at this point. But that's about when.
I don't even think you believe that anymore. You don't even like basketball anymore.
No, I just yelled no.
Damn you! No.
I can't imagine watching a baseball game before the NBA playoffs have played themselves out. And I bet if you look at some, television viewing, I think there's a spike at that point, because what's left?
I would suggest that's just a lack of imagination. I think you need to work on that. So
I've been on a roll today, here, Miller. I interrupted you during your intro, and I'm bashing baseball. I'm feeling my oats.
I didn't play the straight man enough. There were some really silly things you said this past podcast. I should have jumped on it. So I was trying to.
I took advantage of your condition.
I am in a weakened state, and I think it's. Frankly, you're better. Well, you may not be better than that, but I thought maybe you would be better than that. So, all right, what the hell? Let's go ahead and wrap it up. And
we should.
And so, with that, we shall bid adieu. And I wish you a great weekend here, Dr. Bourgeois.
I do enjoy as well here, Miller.